focus of today's webinar is the Institutional Challenge Grant, which aims to connect research with policy and practice to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. I am very excited about today's conversation. In part one of the webinar, we will offer an overview of the Institutional Challenge Grant, provide an introduction to the first grantee, Cornell University, and then pause to answer some of your questions. In the second half of the webinar, I will speak more about the award and application, offer a quick sketch of who applied in 2017 and shifts in the 2018 application, and direct you to some resources. The Institutional Challenge Grant brings together the Foundation's two areas of focus for its research grant making. Our Youth of Research Evidence Initiative focuses on strategies to improve the use of research and supports studies that help us understand how to create the conditions that improve the production and use of research in ways that benefit youth. Our Reducing Inequality initiative focuses on responses to inequality and supports studies that help us understand how programs, policies, and practices reduce inequality in outcomes among young people in the United States. Our hope is that the Institutional Challenge Grant will facilitate research investments that yield knowledge that is useful to decision makers and research that is used in ways that improve outcomes for youth. But this is no easy task. Too often, policymakers and practitioners' ideas fail to shape research agendas. Too often, researchers lack incentives to undertake research to inform policy and practice. And too often, the capacity is lacking to bridge these gaps. Resources are needed to establish more effective ways of working. The Institutional Challenge Grant was designed with these needs in mind. The grant encourages research institutions to build sustained research practice partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations. To have the partnerships pursue a joint research agenda to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. To create institutional change to value research practice partnerships and their work, and to develop both partners' capacity to collaborate and to produce and use high-quality, relevant research. While this challenge is ambitious, we believe this is what is needed to advance the production and use of research in ways that benefit youth. Now let's take a closer look at some of these aims. The Institutional Challenge Grant encourages university-based research institutes, schools, and centers to build sustained research practice partnerships with public agencies or nonprofit organizations to reduce inequality in youth outcomes. We define research practice partnerships as long-term, mutually beneficial collaborations that promote the production and use of rigorous and relevant research. In other words, they adopt a long-term view, persist beyond a single project, involve relationships between institutions, not just one or two individuals, and benefit both parties. The Foundation's focus on research practice partnerships reflects a growing body of theoretical and empirical work that suggests that these types of collaborations help researchers develop an understanding of the local context, learn about the needs and questions of policymakers and practitioners, and provide insights that can facilitate groundbreaking research. These partnerships also benefit the public agency or nonprofit organization. They help policymakers and practitioners gain access to existing research, to contribute to research that is relevant to their local context, and receive assistance in their efforts to use research. In short, partnerships are a promising strategy for connecting research with policy and practice in a way that's meaningful for the local context. While research practice partnerships can be rewarding, they are also time-intensive and require support from the institutions involved. What sets the Institutional Challenge Grant apart from other initiatives is its recognition that policies and practices within institutions may inadvertently create barriers to a partnership's success. For example, promotion criteria that value publishing in academic outlets, publishing often, and publishing on a narrow range of topics make it difficult to attract and retain public agencies or nonprofits as partners. Such incentives also make it difficult to attract and retain experienced researchers who want to address questions that are relevant to policy and practice, and difficult to devote the time needed to cultivate the trusting and sustained relationships. In response, the initiative challenges research institutions to examine the ways that their own policies and practices deter participation in partnerships, and to not just stop there, but to propose a plan or roadmap to revisit and redesign internal policies and practices to address barriers to success. Strategies might include reduction in course and service obligations, greater flexibility in promotion review policies, and courses and training in partnership. We welcome your bold ideas. In addition to the call for institutional change, a focus on reducing inequality in youth outcomes is critical to the initiative and anchors it. We contend that inequality by economic, racial, ethnic, and immigrant origins is pervasive. That evidence often exists about the causes and consequences of inequality, but the ways to reduce inequality are less well understood. A goal for the partnership's work is to increase the utility and strength of evidence available to inform responses. With these goals in mind, I'm pleased to introduce to you the first Institutional Challenge Grant awardee. Pictured here are Rachel Dunifon of Cornell University and Anna Steinkraus of the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County. Also pictured is Laura Tuck, the partnership's first research fellow. Although they just received the award and will be formally launching their project this summer, we have asked them to tell you about their partnership, their research agenda, and plans for institutionalizing the work. Our hope is that this will give you a more concrete picture of what an Institutional Challenge Grant might look like. After we hear from Rachel, we'll pause for questions and then move on to more about the mechanics of the award and application. Welcome, Rachel, and take it away.
Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. We are very, very honored to be the first grantees for the Institutional Challenge Grant and really excited to share with you some of what we've learned and how we've got to this point so far. So the title of our grant is Protecting Vulnerable Families and Children in the Crosshairs of the Opioid Epidemic, a Research Practice Partnership. And our team consists of my co-PI, Anna Steinkraus, who, as Kim mentioned, had an unexpected emergency and is not able to be with us today. But as you'll hear through my conversation with you, she has been front and center with this work. She and I have been working in partnership throughout this entire process, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Here in the College of Human Ecology at Cornell, I'm joined with Laura Tack, who is an associate professor here at Cornell and is the first faculty fellow for this project, as well as Elizabeth Day, who is a postdoctoral fellow working with us on this project. So first, I'm just going to talk to you about the research side of it and what specific issue we're addressing with our research practice partnership. And we focus specifically on the opioid epidemic and its influence on disadvantaged rural youth. And up here, I'm in Ithaca, New York, and we are in a very rural area of the state of New York. And so we're surrounded by families who are suffering here in our county from the opioid epidemic. And you can see by these statistics presented here that the number of Americans dying every day from opioid overdoses is incredibly high. Here in New York, the rate of opioid overdose deaths has increased dramatically just in 1 year, and it's continuing to go up, and that's particularly the case in rural communities. And we see a potential linkage between parental opioid use and child maltreatment. However, there's really not a great deal of research that fully documents and understands the link between opioid use and child maltreatment, and more importantly, what we can do to address that. This figure here is really what motivated us to study this topic. This is data on Tompkins County, New York, which is where I'm situated and where the partnership is taking place. You can see in the red line a very sharp uptick in emergency room visits involving opioids. You can see in the blue line a slight uptick in misdemeanor arrests, and you can see in the gray line some increases in child maltreatment. And what we want to know is how those different things are related to each other. What's the relationship between the increase in opioid use and the increase that we're seeing in child maltreatment? So I want to talk a little bit about how we developed this research agenda. And the really important point is that the idea to study this topic and to delve deep into the linkage between opioid use and child maltreatment came from our community partner. So Anna Steinkraus and her colleagues at Cornell Cooperative Extension here in Tompkins County are heavily engaged in the community, and they have spent decades working with vulnerable families. And on the ground, they were seeing emerging concerns related to parental opioid use and a possible connection with what they were seeing as increased rates of child maltreatment. So Anna and her colleagues brought this issue to us at Cornell, and we began looking into the topic, identifying what are some of the relevant research questions we might want to address, as well as possible interventions. So really the fact that we were talking about pressing needs in the community, and that Anna, based on her engagement in the community, was able to identify this topic was a really key starting point for our collaboration together. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership and the nature of our relationship before we began working on this grant and how it's evolved over time. Anna Steinkraus and I have known each other for many years. Her cooperative extension office is located right here in Tompkins County. It's about a 20-minute drive from where I'm located at Cornell University. And we've seen each other at some workshops, some trainings, and things like that. And we've been very friendly with each other. But we hadn't really worked together on a specific research project or intervention to date. Some of our previous work together included providing some students to assist her in evaluating some of her parenting programs that they do at Tompkins County Extension. My colleague Laura worked with Anna, and Anna was very helpful to her in recruiting families for a research study that she was doing. But these were sort of very specific one-off kind of collaborations together, and not something as substantial and sustained as what we were pursuing. But the bottom line is Anna and I had known each other for quite a while, and over that time, even through these more limited interactions we had, that allowed us to take the time to build a significant level of trust and communication with each other, which was really essential as we began to work on the grant. And this grant really gave us the opportunity to take that sort of budding but limited relationship where we each knew of and respected each other and wanted to do more together, but didn't have the opportunity to do so, and turn it into something formal and something that will be sustained over a much longer period of time. So I want to talk now a little bit about how we developed the proposal, and I'll start with the process. Here at Cornell in the College of Human Ecology, as soon as I saw the description and the call for proposals for the Institutional Challenge Grant, I knew we had to go for it because it's so consistent with our mission here in the college and the type of work that we seek to do. And so I really set my sights on the grant from the very beginning, as soon as I saw it. As I mentioned, my team and I began talking to Anna as a potential community partner, and she immediately talked about this connection between parental opioid use and child maltreatment. And so the real meat of the research idea came directly from Anna and her team. Once we had that sort of general framework of wanting to go for the grant, identifying our partnership, and identifying the topic that we really wanted to work on, we really undertook an iterative process of developing our research practice agenda. And so here at Cornell, we began looking into sort of what is the latest research in this area and what are the holes where more research is needed. And we also began thinking with Anna about what types of programs are going on here in our community that might address this, and where are the gaps? Where is some research lacking? Where are programs and policies lacking? Or where do we simply just not have enough data to fully understand the landscape of this topic? So this took place over many, many meetings and phone calls. The fact that we're relatively, very close to each other in physical proximity was very helpful. We oftentimes, all of our meetings took place down with Anna and her location at the Cooperative Extension Office because it was easier for us to go down there than for her to come up here. We developed a system of sharing and commenting on documents. And again, it took place over quite a long period of time, and it was very iterative, very back and forth. So what are some of the lessons we learned from developing the proposal? The most important thing that I would say is that this is really not your typical research proposal. So those of you who are at research institutions or who are faculty members and may have experience putting together even rather large, complex research proposals, this is even more complex, and it takes a significant amount of time. So I would really caution that it's very important to start early. It's not the type of thing that can get done in the last minute. And if you start to look through the RFP and the call for proposals, you'll get a sense of why, because the types of information that's being asked for, part of it is a very standard, compelling argument about your research agenda and why it's important. But there's many other components to the proposal that really take significant thought and time. Things about how the fellows are going to be chosen at each site and what the skills are that they're going to learn through this process. And that requires a lot of thought and conversation between the partners. Things such as how the research organization is going to think about going through institutional change as a result of this work. There's many components about the budget that get very complicated. So I think it's important just to have this truly be a partnership, and that just requires time because all of the partners need to be involved and working together and contributing to the project. So my main message would be to give yourself a lot of time. We oftentimes felt like at the end we were scrambling and that maybe we were rushed, but in reality, we spent a very significant amount of time on this. It was also incredibly helpful to us that Cornell was able to provide some additional supports to help us in this work. So we got a very small grant from Cornell that allowed us to sort of begin some of the work. And that was really valuable. This work was evaluating some of the programming that Anna and her colleagues are doing in the community. And having that small grant right up front, before we even knew if we were going to be getting the larger grant, was really helpful because it allowed us to recognize the significant amount of time that Anna contributed to developing this project and have her get something very tangible out of that work, regardless of whether we were able to get the award or not. And then really importantly, we were very fortunate that through some donor funds, Cornell was able to fund a postdoc who was incredibly helpful for us in just sort of going through all the logistics and putting together the grant. It really helped us, but I also think it was really helpful to her at her stage in her career to be involved in this type of work. So one of the key components of the grant, as you'll see, is having fellows at the research institution who are faculty who will be given support from the grant and involved in the work going on through the project. So here at Cornell, the Cornell Research Fellows, we will be selecting mid-career scholars who are at the very top of their fields here at Cornell. We will have one per year. And Anna and I will be working together collaboratively to select these fellows. And the first one is Laura Tack. She's already been chosen, and it really was very advantageous to us to choose her at the very beginning. Again, we chose her even before we knew if we would be getting this funding, because being able to incorporate her in the grant process was extremely helpful. And I think, again, not only will benefit the project, but also benefited her as well, just being involved in developing and writing such a complex and interesting grant. The research fellows here at Cornell will be mentored by both me and Anna on a skill that they want to know, but they haven't had an opportunity to develop yet, which is how to carry out field research in collaboration with community partners. So we'll have regular meetings and we'll have some skill-specific training, and I'll go into some of those skills in the next slide. And it'll really be a process that to some extent is tailored to each individual fellow, in which we try to understand and adjust as needed the steps that we need to build research partnerships that are respectful, long-lasting, and sustaining. There surely will be bumps in the road. There surely will be unexpected things that come up. And the key is to sort of develop a regular pattern of collaboration and communication that allows us to talk through all of those things. So some of the skills that we'll be developing for the Cornell Research Fellows will be some of these things some of them that relate to specific activities that we're doing. One of our first activities that the research fellow will be involved with is a consensus conference here at Cornell. So we'll be doing a consensus conference on opioid use and child maltreatment. And this is a model that we've used here at Cornell on many other topics, particularly in the area of aging. And what this is sort of your standard review of the literature and synthesis of all the all the cutting edge research on a certain topic, but infused with that is the practitioner perspective. So we not only look at the most cutting edge research, but also programs and practice in the area that we're focusing on. And then we have a conference that brings together researchers and practitioners to review this body of work and translate it into action items, either in the policy realm or here in Tompkins County in terms of our practice that result from this work. So the research fellows will be very involved with that. They will also be involved in community cafes, which is a model that Anna and her colleagues at Cooperative Extension have perfected. And then that's when they go out into some of the rural communities in this area and bring together families to talk about pressing topics that they face in their lives. And here again, we'll be focusing specifically on the opioid epidemic. The faculty fellows will also be taught or trained in how to turn their research into products beyond the typical journal article or book chapter. So things such as research briefs, policy briefs, handouts that could go directly to parents. They'll be thinking about how to take what we do and translate into something very tangible like that. And then finally, the research fellows will gain expertise in carrying out program evaluation in real world settings, partnering with Anna to do that. And what we're really excited about is choosing faculty fellows who are really leaders in their field. They're really the future leaders here at Cornell and in their academic community. And we feel that by enhancing their skills in this way, not only will they increase their capacity to do this type of work, but it will spill over to others, even if they're not directly participating in this project, through their mentorship and collaboration with others as they move forward. When we think about the fellow at Cornell Cooperative Extension, Tompkins County, that will also be a really significant position. And again, the grant contains funding for a position at Tompkins County that could be devoted to this project. And this is incredibly valuable for Anna and her colleagues, because most of the staff at Cornell Cooperative Extension work on very short-term, soft money contracts that are focused on a very, very specific type of project. And that really gives them little to no opportunity to increase their capacity to collaborate in research or to delve deep into pressing issues over a longer period of time. So the fact that this funding is sustained over several years and is a stable source of funding for the Cooperative Extension staff is incredibly important. The Cornell Cooperative Extension Fellow will be chosen by the PIs as well as the faculty fellow in our larger team. And we've actually just been drafting up the position description, and the search is going to be launched very, very soon. And this grant will give the Cooperative Extension Fellow the time, the skills, and the stable funding source to develop some significant research skills, including, for example, how to do a literature review in a way of understanding the most recent research in an area and what it means for this topic. They'll also learn about qualitative research design, implementation, and analysis. They'll learn about things such as doing focus groups with community members, and sort of understanding how to take the data that they gather and implement it in terms of their programming. They'll also be involved in the program evaluation, which is a really important skill. And because the fellow at Cornell Cooperative Extension is part of this larger Cornell Cooperative Extension network that extends across the state, we feel that once these skills are enhanced in our local extension office here, they can be taken across the state through the extension system and applied in many other different locations and for many other different topics. And then when we think about how we are going to develop institutional change here at Cornell, first, the most important part of that, I think, will be building this cohort of faculty who are top scholars here at Cornell and who can develop the skills to engage in research practice partnerships that, again, I think will spread out well beyond the focus of this specific project. We're also going to take this model across campus. So we're here in the College of Human Ecology. There are numerous other colleges across campus here at Cornell, many of whom are also interested in these types of partnerships but don't know how to do them. And so I think we can use this model and take some of the lessons learned, the approach that we used, and I can collaborate with the leaders of those other colleges and help seed this type of work throughout this quite large university that I'm at. We're going to be conducting a forum on research practice partnerships in the tenure and promotion process, which I think is a very hot topic, as Kim mentioned, and something that I have a lot of expertise in. And we'll also, near the end of the project, be conducting a forum that uses this project as a case study, talking through, what our goals were, what we did, bumps along the way, lessons learned, and sort of extrapolating from our project to sort of thinking about how this is going to be applied in other areas. And then finally, a really important part of what we'll be doing in terms of allowing this to become ingrained here at Cornell and to support institutional change will be seeking financial support to sustain this model beyond the period of the grant. I feel that this is the type of model that donors and others, I think, would be particularly interested in, and I'm excited to take this model and use it to generate some resources that we can have it be sustained going forward. So that's all I have in terms of my presentation, and I think now I'll turn it back to Kim.
Great. Thank you, Rachel, for providing such a detailed description of your project, your process for working together, and the goals for the work, both for the institutions and for the youth involved. Before we move on to discuss the specifics of the award and application, let's pause and take some questions, both about your project or more general questions about the institutional challenge grant. First, we have one question directed to you, Rachel, which is, can you say a little bit more about what success might look like for your institution or the partnership at the end of the 5-year period?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's several ways that which we would think of this as being successful. First of all is the fact that we're really, this issue of opioid use and child maltreatment is so pressing, and there's such a gap in terms of both the research and the programs that can address it, that being able to contribute to that knowledge base, as well as being able to implement and evaluate programs here in the county to address this would be incredibly important and something that I think would be a significant contribution. And I am looking forward to being able to do something that would really addresses this incredibly pressing local need. I think another metric of success will be that the fellows at each institution increase the skills in the way that I described. I think we could build in ways to sort of, we'll be having such regular communications and check-ins that it'll be very important for us to build in assessments to better understand the skill development process of the fellows here at Cornell University, as well as at the Cooperative Extension Office, and understand, how those skills are being increased, what we need to do to improve that. And ultimately, it'll be an indicator of success when the fellows come away with this, with a robust set of skills that not just apply to this project, but that they then use in the rest of their work going forward. And then finally, it'll be really important to me, again, to find a way to sustain this model beyond the life of the grant. And that's something that I think needs to be thought up from the very beginning and that I'm really focused on right off the bat.
Great, thank you. We also have a question, and I think this actually would be nice if we both responded to it. Rachel, someone has asked, what types of evidence do reviewers want to see that the institution has the capacity to build fellows capacity and university-wide research practice partnership capacity? And I'll start, and then if you want to talk about your specific experience, that would be helpful too. So the review, the selection criteria that are included in the guide call out looking for a specific plan for how you'll go about developing the fellow's capacity. As Rachel noted, for the researcher's capacity, there's a lot of focus on making sure that they're good partners. This is a place that often doesn't receive attention in researchers' training. How are we convinced, or how are the reviewers convinced that there is that capacity there? In the case of Rachel and Cornell, she had experience mentoring prior people in the past and a strong commitment to it. So there are different ways to accomplish that across the university or by the principal investigator themselves. And the commitment for developing the capacity of the research practice partnerships, we saw many different variants on this, and some were focused on supporting a particular research practice partnership at hand and using that as a springboard to develop partnerships across the university. But the evidence really came from the assurances and the letter from the provost or center director about their commitment to supporting this work. Rachel, is there something you'd like to contribute?
Yeah, I think it was helpful that we had identified our first faculty fellow up front. So for me, it was helpful because that person, Laura Tack, was heavily involved in the grant proposal. But I think probably also what helped is there was a tangible example of someone and an explanation of how participating in this would really benefit her and sort of take her work in a new direction. We also, when we made it to the finalist stage here at Cornell, we provided information on some other people who we could imagine might be potential fellows, with the caveat that the team would be working together to choose the next set of fellows. But we wanted to illustrate that we have a lot of different sort of mid-career faculty here at Cornell who would be excellent candidates for this type of thing, should the opportunity be presented to them. And then I think finally, again, sort of, we had a lot of different letters from center directors, a vice provost, the director of cooperative extension, which were intended to show that the institution was buying into this. And we also had gotten already a little bit of financial support for it that also indicated that this was of high value to our institution in some very tangible ways.
Great. We have a number of other questions. I'm going to put two together, Rachel, and direct it to you. Folks are wondering, who specifically do you see as using the knowledge and the products produced from the partnership you're describing? And if you could talk a little bit more about your model for sustaining in the longer run, beyond the time frame of the grant.
Sure. I think that the people who will use the resources, first of all, here in Tompkins County, we're partnering, we'll be evaluating a couple different approaches to addressing the link between opioid use and child maltreatment. We'll be working with a local family treatment court and evaluating that model. We'll be also evaluating a family-based intervention program in light of how it addresses this concern. And then we'll be using the information that we've gained from that work to inform the programming going right here in Tompkins County to identify things that are working well that need to be expanded, things that are remaining as gaps that need to be filled. So I think there'll be some tangible programmatic benefits right here in the county. When we think about that consensus conference that I was talking about, that will be a really large systematic review of the research and programmatic work going on in this area. And so I think, one thing that'll come out of that will be an academic paper, but all other things that'll come out of it will be very specific briefs and information that we can transmit directly to nonprofit agencies, other extension offices throughout the state and beyond, and even things that might go directly to parents or family members who are working in this area. So we want to have some really specific results from that work as well. And then in terms of the sustainability, so we have some infrastructure here at Cornell that can be a sort of a framework in which we could house this model going forward, if we had a sustainable amount of funding. So, you could imagine if I was able to get a significant amount of funding that would allow me to continue this work beyond the life of the grant, I could continue to have faculty fellows who do this type of thing. So even when this project is over, we could continue to select a faculty fellow from our college each year and a partnering organization who could then develop their own specific research topic and address it, through the time and the money that's allowed through something like a fellowship. So I think it really comes down to being able to replicate the fellows model going forward if we had enough funding to do that. And that's a big priority.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to put a pause on the questions right now, and we'll come back to them after we talk a little bit more about the specifics of the award, who applied for the first year of the competition, and what's new for the second year. Okay, funding for the Institutional Challenge Grant closely mirrors the goals of the initiative. The Institutional Challenge Grant will provide $650,000 for 3 years, with the possibility of a 2-year renewal to get to the 5-year term that Rachel referenced. The renewal affords recipients of the award the opportunity to solidify the partnership and the institutional change. The monies within the grant map closely to the goals of the program. Up to 9 months are allocated for planning periods, such as refining the research agenda, selecting fellows, and finalizing the partnership agreement. There are also funds for the partnership to conduct research to reduce inequality and youth outcomes, funding for the equivalent of 1 full-time mid-career fellow per year for 2 years, resources to support activities that develop both partners' capacities, and an indirect cost allowance of up to 15% of total direct costs. Just to be clear, all of these costs and the indirect allowance are included in the $650,000 total. In addition to funding from the foundation, the research institution must contribute the equivalent of 1 full-time fellow for 1 year. Before moving on to the 2018 competition, we thought it might be helpful to know a little bit about the partnerships that applied in 2017. We received 41 applications from partnerships varying considerably in the stage of their maturity, from relatively new to having to work together for more than a decade. Most of the proposed partners, similar to what Rachel and Anna would have described, ended their competition at least knowing each other through earlier project-based work, and a few had been working together for years. The applying partnerships also proposed work in a variety of youth-serving areas, including education, community, justice, child welfare, and mental health and health. 1/3 of the leadership teams included a person of color. Further, proposals were submitted from across the country with a nice balance of public, the blue dot, and private institutions, the red dot. The star represents the location of our first grantee. We hope to see an even broader distribution in the coming year. Thus, the foundation staff and the selection committee were pleased with the group of partnerships that applied to the first round of the competition. We also worked with the selection committee to consider what changes we might make to encourage an even more robust pool of applications. There remain many similarities across the calls for proposals for the first and second years of the competition. However, a few adjustments were introduced, which I'll call out here and which are noted in the guide. First, the competition now targets exclusively university-based research institutes, schools, and centers. This represents a change from the first year of the competition, when we challenged research institutions both within and outside of the academy. Second, we shortened the duration and funds for the planning period. The most competitive proposals were those that used the planning period to refine their working agreements, fellow recruitment, and research plans. This was typically done in less than a year. So we reduced the duration and funding of the planning period to 9 months and $50,000. Third, the application now includes a 4-page structured abstract that requests details about the 4 goals of the program to help standardize the abstract's reviews. In the first year of the competition, the quality and the content of the abstracts were highly variable. Yet abstracts are critical part of the application review process. Foundation staff use them to screen applications for further review, and selection committee members will review the abstracts of all finalists, and they may not necessarily read the full proposal. The 2018 guide also requests more detail about the research plan. Many of the proposals reviewed did a great job outlining the goals for the work, but based on the limited guidance that we provided, offered few details about the method. This made it challenging for reviewers to fully evaluate the quality and potential of the work. The new guide is much more specific about the type and extent of the information required about the research plan. Lastly, we encourage applicants to often even bolder plans about institutional change to elevate the value of research practice partnerships and their work. To wrap up, I want to quickly highlight a few elements of the proposal that continue to be essential. All proposals need to provide a compelling plan for building a sustained research practice partnership, one that's likely to endure beyond the award. The plan for partnering needs to demonstrate mastery of the literature on partnering to promote research use. And we encourage applicants to read papers by Cynthia Coburn and Larry Palinkas as starting points for developing their partnership plan. There must also be evidence of the public agency or nonprofit's commitment to the partnership and to use the research produced. Here, work supported by the Foundation on the use of research evidence may be helpful. With regard to the research agenda to reduce inequality and youth outcomes, in addition to the additional detail I already noted, it's worth calling out that the research questions and findings must significantly advance the public agency or nonprofit organization's efforts to reduce inequality. The project must employ high-quality methods that are consistent with the goals of the project, and the applicant must demonstrate that the research plan is feasible. Equally important, but more challenging, will be the plan to change institutional policies and practices to value research practices, partnerships, and their work. For most, this section will involve a new type of reflection, brainstorming, and writing. As I mentioned earlier, reviewers will want to see a thoughtful discussion of potential obstacles that may limit participation in research practice partnerships at your institution, a plan for overcoming these obstacles. And these plans need to include assurances that the research institution will alter policies or enact practices to attract support. The success of the partnership will also depend on the capacity of the partners to collaborate and use high-quality research. As we heard from Rachel, the fellows must have the requisite skills to carry out the work, and there must be a clear plan in place to enrich their capabilities and the nonprofit organization or public agency's use of research in decision-making. This will require deep and creative thinking. It is also worth reiterating that all fellows must be mid-career, and the specifics of what we define as mid-career are outlined in the application guide. For a point of interest, many of the applications received in 2017 proposed recruiting 3 full-time research fellows, 2 supported by the award and 1 supported through in-kind support. Others proposed engaging 2 full-time research fellows and 1 full-time fellow from the practice or policy organization, as you heard from Cornell's example. Either scenario is fine, but the choice should be well justified. Lastly, as you develop your application, it may be helpful for you to know the Foundation's aspirations and expectations for the award. At the end of the 5 years, meaning 3 years for the initial grant and the 2 years for the renewal, we expect the research institution will have established a set of strategies that facilitate sustained research collaboration with public agencies or nonprofit organizations. That the public agency or nonprofit has increased its capacity to use research evidence. That participating researchers have improved their partnership skills. And that the research generated has been used in decision making and is likely to lead in improved outcomes for youth. Since we know the challenge that we have presented is significant, we've developed a number of resources to assist with the application process. To start, I encourage you to visit the Foundation's website and to read and reread the application guide. The application guide includes all the topics discussed today and many more specifics about the process for applying and the selection criteria. The website also includes information about the selection committee, which reflects a diverse range of interests, including education, mental health, justice, housing, and child welfare. They also vary in their professional roles, from former university presidents and provosts to researchers and practitioners who are actively engaged in partnerships to leaders of state and local organizations. They also vary in their experiences working in or with private and public research institutions. They did a remarkable job reviewing applications in the first year of the competition, and Foundation staff look forward to working with them again in the coming year. Importantly, the website also houses 3 examples we developed to illustrate different kinds of partnerships, research agendas, fellows, capacity building activities, and institutional shifts. The examples are intended as just that and do not dictate the specific topics, partnerships, or institutional arrangements we are seeking. Rather, they are intended as a launching pad for your good and bold ideas. We also have an area of our website dedicated to research practice partnerships. And in early July, we will relaunch the site to support the work of partnerships in a range of youth-serving contexts, not just education. The site includes tips for building and sustaining partnerships, sample partnership and data sharing agreements from research practice partnerships in child welfare, education, justice, and mental health, as well as other resources that are relevant to the Institutional Challenge Grant. In addition to the resources I just described, our website also houses frequently asked questions about the program and application, and the webinar and the slide recording. We hope you visit and dig deep. Lastly, applications are due on September 7th, 2018. Applications consist of a full proposal and all of the agreements. There are no letters of inquiry for this competition. Please know that we again encourage proposals from teams with members of color in leadership roles, either as the project principal investigator from the university or as the lead for the public agency or nonprofit organization. Now let's spend our remaining time together answering some of your questions.
Thank you, Kim. Speaking of applications, we have a question here that asks whether a research institution can submit more than one application.
Absolutely. There's no limit to the number of applications that may come from a single institution. Please note, though, that there will only be one award per cycle. So an institution that submits 2 applications is in effect competing against itself. But the decision to submit is up to the applicant. Laura, we also have a question here, just to clarify, whether it's $650,000 each year for 3 years or $650,000 total to cover the 3-year period. And the answer is the latter. The total amount is $650,000.
And Kim, someone asks, at what level do you expect changes in institutional policy and practice to occur?
Yes, we've thought deeply about this, and while we aspire for great things, we also recognize what's feasible and possible. So what we have called out in the application guide is a strong plan for for moving to make changes. And we leave it to the applicant to argue what is reasonable to expect in a 3-year and potentially a 5-year period, but to lay out a plan for how they will begin to identify obstacles and responding to them.
Now we have some questions about the research practice partnership. First, someone wants to know whether a pre-existing relationship between the research center and its public partners is required to be competitive.
Sure. So as I showed in the applications that we received in 2017, the competition is open to partnerships at different stages of their maturity. Applicants will need to convince reviewers that the proposed activities add value to what already exists. And this may be more challenging for a partnership that's been around for 10 or 15 years. If the partnership's more nascent, they'll have to provide some initial evidence that the partners have successfully worked together in the past or have the potential to work together and sustain a long-term collaboration in the future.
Thank you. And we have one question about the career stage of the PIs versus the fellows. And either you or Rachel can answer this question. The inclusion of mentoring implies a significant difference in the level of experience. Is mentoring required, or is there a significant difference in career stage?
Sure. When we envisioned the institutional challenge grant and discussed it with the board, we thought there would be a significant difference between the principal investigator and the fellows. And indeed, we have specified that the fellows must be mid-career. However, as we received applications last year, I would say probably about a third of the applications also had the fellow serve as the principal investigator. So the fellow was a mid-career and the PI. The challenge here is that it is difficult to straddle both the role of carrying out the research and enacting or at least facilitating the kinds of institutional change that we like to see. And so we are open to different arguments, but people should be aware of some of the challenges to doing that work. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add about how you came about to decide and a little bit about your role?
Yeah, I think that, from my perspective, I'm more senior, so I'm a full professor, and I'm actually an administrator, a leading administrator in my college, and so for me, I felt like I was in a very just different career stage than the fellow, and that my role was really in the mentoring side, mentoring the fellows, as well as thinking about the institutional change component. And because I am more senior and have been in this administrative role for a long time, I felt like that was something that I had the ability to do. I think so for us, it worked well to have those be two different people and to have there be a mentor-mentee relationship between the two of them.
Great, thank you. We also have a question about the source of the match for the fellow. And again, we require the match. How it's sourced is up to the applicant. So there is flexibility in that. Okay, we probably have time for about one more question, and then we will close down. And as a reminder, we will be posting the slides and the webinar and sending it to people who participated today via the email, at least the slides. Lenore, any other questions? Or
yes. Do public libraries qualify under public agency for a partner?
Sure. If it's a nonprofit, if it's a nonprofit, they're eligible to apply. And so we received applications last year from museums and other sorts that would fall in the same public agency or funding category. That would be fine.
And are there restrictions on the eligibility of the academic institutions to be the academic partner in the partnership? Does it have to be a U.S.-based university?
it has to be nonprofit or 501c3 status. Our outcomes are focused on U.S.-based youth, so we imagine in almost all the cases that the university would also be based in the United States. I think that wraps it up for today. We thank you for your participation and welcomed your good questions. As a reminder, we will post the webinar and the slides in the coming weeks. And if we weren't able to get to your question on the call, we will follow up in the near future with an email. Thank you so much for joining.